an Uber passenger reached forward and tapped the driver on the shoulder. He had a question. At that, the driver went quiet. And then look, don't ever do that again. You scared the daylights out of me. And the passenger, he apologized. He said, I didn't realize that a little tap would scare you so much. And the Uber driver said, well, it's not your fault. Just kind of freaked me out. Today is my first day as an Uber driver, and I've been driving a funeral hearse for the last 25 years. Our circumstances can condition how we think about stuff. And so either our circumstances will or our reality will condition us. The title is Life Worth Living? And if you want a clear answer to this question, maybe you ask someone who is looking at it from a real-time perspective. What I mean by that is this. Would you ask someone who has everything, is life worth living? And you might get an answer like this. Absolute futility. Life is absolutely futile. Everything is futile. What does a man gain for all his efforts that he labors under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises, the sun sets, panting, and returns to its place where it rises, etc., etc., etc. A lot of people who have taken the road of materialism to success, they've been very disappointed with that. Because that doesn't deliver what it promises. It looks good, it may be fun for a while, but it doesn't give what we ask of it. You can also ask Paul the same question, and that's what we're doing tonight. As we look at Philippians chapter 1, verses 12 through 20, we're asking Paul this question: is life worth living? And it makes sense, in my mind, that you ask someone who's down and out with nothing to lose. Because they may give you a clearer answer, and especially if it's somebody like Paul who's dealing with reality. Paul's not dealing with, I wish life would be like this, or I hope life would be like this. He's dealing with life as it really is. So if you will read with me, Philippians chapter 1, beginning in verse 12, it says, now, I want you to know, brothers, that what has happened to me has actually resulted in the advance of the gospel, so that it has become known throughout the whole imperial guard and to everyone else that my imprisonment is in the cause of Christ. Most of the brothers in the Lord have gained confidence from my imprisonment and dare even to speak the message fearlessly. To be sure, some preach Christ out of envy and strife, but others out of goodwill. These do so out of love, knowing that I'm appointed for the defense of the gospel. The others proclaim Christ out of rivalry, not sincerely seeking to cause me anxiety in my imprisonment. What does it matter? Just that in every way, whether out of false motives or pure, that Christ is proclaimed. And in this I rejoice. Yes, I will rejoice because I know that this will lead to my deliverance through your prayers and the help of of Jesus Christ. My expectation and hope is that I will not be ashamed about anything, but that now, as always, with all boldness, Christ will be highly honored in my body, whether by life or by death. Now, as you listen to how he describes his circumstance and his situation, the way he looks at life and how he would answer that question, is life worth living? He's not allowing what is happening to him to cloud the real answer. That's what happens with me a lot of times. I get caught up in my circumstances, and sometimes, depending on the day, you might ask me that question. I might say, not today. It hasn't been worth it today. It's been hard today. And that happens when I lose track of what's real and what's most important and who I really am. And so because Paul is dealing with this from a real-time perspective, he can say things like, I'm imprisoned, but it's actually working out for the best. This is actually helping me in my message, in my ministry, in my purpose. He can say that because he's not focusing on his circumstances. He's not been conditioned by his circumstances. And when you read the account or some of the accounts of his life, this is not a new thing. This whole being in prison thing, this is not a new thing for him. And the amazing thing about it is that he is not discouraged. As a matter of fact, he says in verse 20, my eager expectation and hope is that I will not be ashamed about anything, but that now, as always, with all boldness, Christ will be highly honored in my body, whether by life or by death. See, this is his life. I think verse 20 is something that we need to adopt for ourselves. He knows what's most important in this world as he lives. It's not the circumstances. It's not that he's imprisoned. It's not that he's been beaten. It's not that there are people who are against him. It's this. He says that now, as always, with all boldness, Christ will be highly honored in my body, whether by life or by death. See, that's reality. He's living his life for his Creator. That's reality. Not for his circumstances, or not being filtered by his circumstances. He is living life based on the ultimate reality. And his goal, his purpose is that whatever happens, Christ will be honored. And with this kind of purpose, we can continually move forward because of what this purpose does for us. And the first thing it does for us in our lives is it fills the most important longing that we have. And I believe this is the most important longing that everybody has, especially if their lives are conditioned by their circumstances. It makes them lose track of who they are and what life is all about. It makes us forget that we are created in the image of God. And I believe of all the options out there, that this idea that we were created by a loving and almighty God makes the most sense of anything. I tried life without God, and it didn't work. There are some other philosophies you can live by, but they still end up no place. That sense within us that there's something more to this life, that comes from the fact that we are created in God's image, and when we are stuck on mortality issues, that comes to play, and we feel out of sorts, we feel lost, we feel confused. And on top of that, all this stuff happening doesn't seem right. So this makes the most sense of any other option. Who are we? Who are you? Who am I? It makes best sense of the evidence that's out there about is... Some people say you can't prove that there's a God. I guess you can't, in a sense. But I do think that there is intelligence out there, and that our world reflects in some sort of and they call it intelligent design. I think our world reflects intelligent design. Within the DNA is a language. It's a code. This is from the Intelligent Design website. There's a lot of good information about this. Intelligent design refers to a scientific research program as well as a community of scientists, philosophers, and other scholars who seek evidence of design in nature. The theory of intelligent design holds that certain features of the universe and of living things are best explained by an intelligent cause, not an undirected process such as natural selection. Some people say this is just another way to restate creationism, but it's really not. There are people who believe in intelligent design who struggle with the idea of creator, personal God that we embrace and we understand. But they can see that there is design to our world. And at the most basic level, DNA creates instructions. And when those things happen, when the instructions for the separation of a cell, for the growth of an organ, the things that happen within the body, that all begins with the basic instructions of DNA. This feels the most important longing for us and makes the most sense because of the dignity that is afforded, that I am not a mistake. I am not only a personal mistake of two people, but a cosmic mistake of the cosmos, that there is purpose and that there is value to humans. There is a moral standard when we look at what's in Scripture. There is a moral standard for how to live our lives. And that moral standard makes sense. It seems to fit. Not only are people positively blessed by it, when you go against the standard, when you live against God's moral standard, the problems that arise seem to suggest that we should try and do something else in our lives instead of living outside of the standard that's there. That Paul believed this fulfills the most important longing is just kind of highlighted by the fact that this is why he was in prison. He was in prison because he believes that The message of the gospel brings human dignity, brings a moral standard for life that makes sense of the evidence that is out there. And because he believed this so strongly that he gave his life for it, that's how he ended up in prison. So it's kind of a little twist on maybe some of our realities. I know some of the things that I've done have led to negative consequences. Maybe things like what Paul's going through, you wouldn't expect them from someone who's trying to do the right thing with his life. You would expect it from a different context. You would expect it from someone who's maybe trying to cause trouble. Not someone who's trying to underline the dignity and the value of life. But because Paul is living according to reality that there is a God, it gives him value outside of his experience. And when humans lose the sense of who they are, things begin to get off track. And they are unable to evaluate whether or not their situation is good or bad. If you don't have a standard by which to evaluate what's going on in your life, then you're going to have a hard time determining what is good or what is bad. Was Paul being in prison a bad thing? Or was it a good thing? Yeah. Paul also helps us as we ask the question and maybe look to his words for an answer. Is life worth living? His words help us make sense of our circumstances. If I understand that there is suffering in the world, if there is a moral standard, and when people violate the moral standard, there's going to be consequences, that brings even things that happen to me into perspective. And certainly the things that are happening to Paul, they happen because of the fact that what he was preaching and teaching went against what his society wanted to hear. Because people don't have a place to put their circumstances, it usually results in a hopelessness. And in our society, there continues to be a high cost for hopelessness. And as I was doing some reading in preparation, I found some of the statistics that speak to that there is currently an uptake right now in the suicide rates in our country. Right now it is the 10th leading cause of death in the U.S. for people of all ages. It is higher for some age groups than others, but overall it's the 10th leading cause. Every day, when you break down the basic number, 105 Americans die by suicide. There is one death by suicide in the U.S. every 12 minutes. Depression, which often comes from this confusion about what life is all about. These things are happening to me. Why? These things are happening to me. It doesn't make sense. Depression affects 20 to 25% of Americans over the age of 18. Suicide takes the lives of over 38,000 Americans every year. And only half of all Americans experiencing an episode of major depression receive treatment. So this kind of gets to some of the societal reality behind suicide, is that People don't get the help they need. They can't find the help that they need. They think life is hopeless. They think there's no purpose in all this senseless suffering I'm going through. I'm done with it. 80 to 90% of people that seek treatment for depression are treated successfully using therapy and or medications. So as people look for help and as people have opportunity to get help, there is a difference. An estimated 250,000 people each year become suicide survivors. So there are too many people that commit suicide, but there's a whole lot more that try and don't succeed. There's one suicide attempt for every estimated 25 suicide attempts. And there is one suicide attempt for every estimated 4 suicide attempts in the elderly. Because that's when perhaps hopelessness is most pronounced. And, maybe I'm not there in regards to thinking about suicide. But I'm sure not giddy about how awesome life is, and isn't it great? But most of us fall somewhere in the middle of that, where we're trying to make sense of our world, and it's not working out. And I believe not only does the scriptural narrative tell us what's wrong with our world, and gives us the solution, by the way, it also underlines the importance of a positive mindset. And I get that from James chapter 1, where James says, "Consider it all joy." And so joy is not giddy, joy is not happy, joy is a deep sense of contentment that all is okay, all is well. And I kind of translate that to a positive mindset. I believe that's why Paul is able to look at his circumstances and see the good things that are happening. Because he's not caught in a cycle of hopelessness. He's not caught on a track that's going nowhere. His life is going somewhere. As a matter of fact, he's figured out his life is going where it was supposed to go. And a lot of people never get there. And so they have little to be positive about. And we struggle with seeing that what's going on in my life has anything to do with my purpose. See, Paul is able to do that. I guess he could have responded differently to his circumstance, right? He could have been pessimistic. He could have said, as soon as I get out of jail this time, I'm going to the islands. I'm done with this. People don't like me. People don't appreciate me. And sometimes what's going on in my life and my purpose in life don't quite meet. There may be some overlap, but I think for a lot of people, they completely miss. We wonder, how did we get here? How did this happen? But if I'm able to understand reality, that this world was created by God, and I'm put here for a purpose, and it has something to do with what the Creator wants me to do, then when things happen, there's going to be some alignment in my life. Things are going to meet. Things are going to make sense. Things are going to come together, and I can then have this positive mindset and open up and say, okay, I can see where this is going to lead to something very good. And remember, kind of the theme verse, chapter 1, verse 20 of Philippians, whether life or death, I honor Christ in my body. So whatever happens, I'm on track. Whatever happens, I'm in the right place. Whatever happens, God is at work. And when I can see God moving through my circumstances, then it will keep me from getting caught up in the wrong battle. Paul in this section talks a bit about motivation. And motivation can be either for us to serve, can be either altruistic, or it can be kind of selfish. He gives a couple of different ways that he communicates this. He said, verse 14, most of the brothers in the Lord have gained confidence from my imprisonment and dare even more to speak the message fearlessly. To be sure, some preach Christ out of envy and strife, but others out of goodwill. So he's talking about motivation. He's using those two ideas and contrasting. Those who teach, preach out of goodwill, these do so out of love, knowing that I'm appointed for the defense of the gospel. So they're understanding the circumstance. And even though Paul's in jail, they understand. And so their motivation is going to reflect that. The others proclaim out of rivalry, not sincerely, seeking to cause me anxiety in my imprisonment. Verse 18, and the statement here is, what does it matter? That's always kind of got my attention. What Paul says, what does it matter? And, it's easy for us to look at something that we don't think is right and get caught up in it. And make it a problem. Sort of get caught in the wrong battle. And Paul is not willing, because that is going to take him from what he should be doing. Sometimes I don't understand how someone who has the wrong motivation can be doing anything good. Now, I do think that if we have the wrong motivation to serve, as time goes on, what we believe is going to degrade. But I've got to be careful I don't get sidetracked by things that don't make a difference. Paul says in 1 Timothy chapter 1, verses 18 through 20, he's talking about, let's flip over it. He's talking about a couple of the people involved in the church there who've kind of got sidetracked. 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 18, Timothy, my son, I am giving you this instruction in keeping with the prophecies previously made about you, so that by them you may strongly engage in battle, having faith and a good conscience. Some have rejected these and have suffered the shipwreck of their faith. So I think motivation can become something else and be problematic, to the point of Hymenaeus and Alexander are among them, and I have delivered them to Satan so that they may be taught not to blaspheme. So they had faith, maybe they were on the right track, but something caused their faith to be shipwrecked. So, and I guess my point here is Paul's not saying, it's not that everything doesn't matter. And we have to use discernment, perhaps. But the most important thing is we need to stay on task about what our purpose is. If this is my purpose, I stay on track with my purpose. I don't get lost in the sidebars. But Paul also says that what the circumstance does is it gives us opportunity. Back in our passage in Philippians. Verse 19, he says, I'm not going to get caught up. As a matter of fact, I'm going to rejoice. In his dire circumstances, he's going to rejoice. Verse 19, because I know this will lead to my deliverance through your prayers and help from the Spirit of Jesus Christ. So that gives the circumstances that other people face in their life, gives us the opportunity to intercede and to positively engage in other people's lives. I'm thinking about something in the shooting in Parkland, Florida, and I think it happened in Las Vegas, the shooting there. Someone said, we need to stop praying about it and take action. And I know that's part of the noise, but it makes me think and wonder and ask and dig into what is it that Paul's talking about here when he's talking about it gives he's through your prayer, so it gives the opportunity for prayer. What's he saying and what's going on there? Are prayers effective? Does that take care of all the problems in life? Is that what's going to fix that situation? And is that really what, in that context, is that what our prayers are all about? If I'm going to engage in prayer as a way to deal with that circumstance, I'm praying for strength for these people who are enduring the suffering. But what if they don't know God? What if they don't love God? How is God going to answer that prayer? What are we expecting to happen as a result of that prayer? Maybe we should be praying for something else. Maybe it speaks to, is life worth living? What is life really all about? And what life should be about for all of us and for all those people, wherever they are, is that they come to this same conviction that whether I live or I die, I'm going to honor Christ with my body. That's what we need to be praying for. That's where, and that's where our action needs to engage. And we can do it with help from God. That's how Paul understood his life was from God, and if my life is going to navigate this difficulty, and if I'm going to know the answer to the question, is life worth living, only if I understand what life is all about, and I begin to align my personal life with reality. Not something that humans have concocted, but with reality, that there is a Creator, and I've been created by Him, and I'm accountable to Him. I'm responsible to Him. In 2 Timothy chapter 4, we'll kind of use this as a close. Paul says, at my first offense, no one stood by me, but everyone deserted me. May it not be counted against them. But the Lord stood with me and strengthened me so that the proclamation might be fully made through me, and all the Gentiles might hear. So I was rescued from the lion's mouth. The Lord will rescue me from every evil work and bring me safely into His heavenly kingdom. To Him be the glory forever and ever. Amen. Over the next week, I want to encourage you to take verse 17 and put in the circumstances of your life. Verse 16, it's all too common. Oftentimes, the people that I don't know, the people that we're supposed to count on, the people that we're supposed to trust, the people that said they got my back. I have to stop thinking that people are who are supposed to have my back. Who's ultimately got our back is Christ. When you read verse 16, doesn't that break your heart? Somebody like Paul, who took hit after hit after hit for the cause. What were they thinking when he was arrested? Well, I guess he deserves it. Why did they desert him? Did they said, well, we don't want to have anything to do with this. He's not our apostle. And so I think the truth behind verse 16 is that there are limitations when I trust people. But there are never limitations when I trust God. Verse 17, but the Lord stood with me and strengthened me so that the proclamation might be fully made through me. See, this is his specific task, the proclamation. And that's how Paul lives out his understanding of who he is. What he's supposed to be doing with his life, his purpose, the implications of the reality in his life. What are yours? What are the implications of the reality that there is a Creator, you've been created by Him, you are accountable to Him? How does that work out in your specific life? What does that look like? Is life worth living? It depends on whether or not I'm holding on to loss or I'm holding on to life. Let's be an encouragement to each other as we desperately seek to hold on to life.